Hey everyone, I'm Joe Mayers, and this is the Think Forever podcast. Today we have a brand new story all about courage. We'll see what it looks like to listen to God even when you can't see Him, and how to trust God not only with your own life, but with the lives of your family. But please enjoy Kelsey Post's story, The Prophet. Thousands of Israelites descended on Shiloh for the yearly sacrifice. Their campsites dotted the hills that surrounded the temple. Weary children slept on cushions while women sat at tent entrances preparing the offerings, grain, and jars of wine. The men coaxed restless animals into the temple courtyard, young bulls and goats that bleated at the afternoon sun. The boy, Samuel, stood at the temple doorpost, craning his neck and scanning the crowds. "She'll be here," he whispered to himself. "I know she will." Samuel fidgeted, drew a circle in the dirt with a sandal-clad foot, and crouched to pull at a loose thread in the woven goat-hair curtain that draped the tabernacle. Finally, he saw her. "Mama!" Samuel shouted. He leapt from the ground and ran to Hannah, kicking dirt as he went and bumping into worshippers who packed the crowded courtyard. He stumbled into his mother, too hard, toppling the offerings she carried, a heavy sack of flour and ceramic bowls for the feast. Hannah let the offerings fall to the ground and caught her little boy as he pummeled into her. "Ouch!" she laughed. Samuel wrapped his arms tight around his mother's waist. She paused for the first time since she'd left her home in Ramah hours earlier. She breathed and ran her hands through her son's hair. It was longer now, curly tendrils that came down to his shoulders. It had never been cut, as Hannah vowed to Eli the priest before God had granted her prayer for a child. "You're so much taller than last year," Hannah marveled. She held his face in her hands, tilting his chin to the sky. In Samuel's face there were glimpses of the toddler she had brought to Shiloh 3 years before, just after he had been weaned. His cheeks had lost some of their babyish roundness, and now freckles were sprayed across his nose and cheeks, each one a mark from the sun numbering the days since she had seen him last. "Ah, but I can still pick you up." Hannah hinged over and put her hands under the 6-year-old's arms to hoist him up. He crumbled to the ground in fits of laughter. She eventually managed to wrangle the boy onto her hip, his legs wrapped around her back. Samuel's father, Elkanah, arrived at their side and kissed his son on the forehead. "You're almost too big. Next time we visit, Mama may not be able to carry you." Hannah nestled Samuel's head under her chin and put a finger to her lips, silently scolding her husband. She could not, would not, think of a time when they wouldn't be together. Samuel slept with his mother and father in their tent that night. The next morning, Elkanah led them into the temple for the sacrifice. Samuel started at Eli's elbow as the priest prepared a young bull, but became squeamish as Eli cut the offering into pieces. He watched from behind his mother's leg as some was burned on the altar, and shrank back from the boiling pot as Eli thrust a fork in to take a portion of meat for the priests. Eli spoke a blessing over Elkanah and his wife. "May the Lord bless you with many more children by this woman. She asked of the Lord, and He has heard her request." Eli smiled as Samuel bounced into the courtyard, and the family joined the others outside for the feast. It was time for Elkanah and Hannah to begin the journey home to Ramah. Time to leave their son. It was early afternoon, and the walk would take 6 hours. Hannah's chest tightened, and she tried to find her breath as she packed their belongings. Inhale, fold the tent covering. Exhale, tie it closed. Samuel interrupted her cadence. "Do you have to go, Mama?" He sniffled and added quietly, "Take me with you?" Hannah froze. She imagined sweeping her son into her shawl and dashing for home, but instead screwed her feet into the ground. They must go. But she needed to give him his gift. Each year, before they departed, Hannah gave her son a linen robe she'd woven at home. She bent down, one knee in the dirt, and helped him don the garment. Samuel was a tangle of arms and fabric. She wondered how he ever managed to get dressed on his own. Eventually, he shrugged the robe onto his shoulders. By then, his tears had bubbled over, running down his dirt-caked face, marking trails down his cheeks and neck. Hannah tied the robe's sash, hugged him tightly, and kissed his tear-stained face. She leaned back slightly, holding her son's shoulders, keeping their faces close. She exhaled slowly to steady her wavering voice. "We've talked about this before, my love. We rejoice in the Lord. He is our strength and salvation. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king." It was the same prayer she recited when she brought her son to the temple 3 years before. "You, my boy, are serving the Lord in the temple, dwelling in his presence. It's the most important job while we wait for the Lord to raise up a king for his people." Elkanah placed a gentle hand on his wife's shoulder. Hannah stood and straightened her garments. She lifted Samuel's hand to her cheek, gave it a squeeze, then dropped his hand, turning to leave. The boy melted to the floor. As his body shuddered in the dirt, Eli the priest rose from his seat near the temple doorpost and shuffled to Samuel's side in the courtyard. He sat with him until nightfall, waiting as the boy's heaving sobs turned to slight whimpers. Samuel fell asleep. Eli was an old man. It had been years since he had held his own sons. He carefully lifted Samuel, the sleeping boy heavy against his chest, and carried him into the temple. The word of the Lord was rare in those days. There was no frequent vision. Eli's own sons, Hophni and Phinehas, did not know the Lord. On days when Samuel prepared an offering in the temple, the brothers would sneak up on him and poke fun at the boy from behind. Samuel hunched over the boiling pot, spreading his arms and fingers to protect the offering. "What are you doing here?" he asked, peering over his shoulder. "What's it to you?" Hophni spat back. I'm preparing the offering," Samuel explained. He presented the metal fork, and his hand trembled. Hophni took a seat close to where Samuel worked and thrummed his fingers on the edge of the kettle. "You haven't washed. You need to follow the rules," Samuel squirmed. Phinehas stepped in now, circling Samuel and the cauldron. "Can you believe this kid?" he snickered to his brother. "Tisk, tisk, careful, Phinehas," the other replied mockingly. "The little priest will tell Daddy we're misbehaving." They erupted in laughter, and Samuel began to cry. They flicked at Samuel, edging him out of the way, and took the choicest meat from the Lord's offering for themselves. Samuel rushed to Eli and collapsed in his lap, weeping. "I'm just trying to help." Eli sighed. "God will judge my sons, for he has said, 'Those who honor me I will honor, but those who despise me will be disdained.'" Each night, Samuel laid in the temple where the Ark of God was, trying to fall asleep on the floor. He rested on a thin cushion and wrapped himself in the robe his mother made for him. He saw Eli's sons creep across the temple, stealing away to shadowy corners to lay with the women who served at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Samuel shut his eyes to keep out the darkness. "Why am I here?" he pled aloud in the night. The robe's sleeves dangled past his wrists. While he waited for sleep through tears, Samuel rubbed the fine linen between his thumb and index finger, wearing a hole in the garment. He drifted off. Hours later, a voice startled the boy awake. "Samuel." He hurried to Eli's room and wheezed, "I'm here. I heard you call me."
"I didn't call you," Eli grumbled. "Lie down again."
So Samuel went and lay down. He curled onto his cushion. His body was still, but his eyes darted around the temple, searching for the voice. "I know I heard something," Samuel tried to soothe himself. "Hophni and Phineas must be trying to scare me." He investigated every shadow that danced on the stone walls, cast from the light of the golden lampstand. Just as he started to fall asleep again, the voice repeated, "Samuel!" He shuddered and ran to Eli, faster this time. Samuel stumbled through the dark into Eli's room. He tripped over the corner of Eli's bed, nearly crashing to the floor, whining, I'm here. What is it?" Eli patted the boy on the hand and then nudged him back in the direction of his mat.
"I didn't call, my son. Lie down again."
Samuel lay down on his mat, pulling his robe tighter around him. The voice called a third time, "Samuel!" And he raced to Eli's side. Eli rolled in his bed as the boy sped into the room. Eli's eyesight was dim, but he could see the boy's eyes widen as they flashed in the light from the golden lampstand. Eli exhaled,
"Do not be afraid. It is the Lord. Go, lie down, and if he calls you, you shall say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant hears.'"
Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. "Why is the Lord calling me?" Samuel quivered. "Can I stay with you?"
Eli insisted, "Go, my son. We may not know why the Lord is calling, but you must go. All you can do is listen."
Samuel returned to his mat, lay down, and waited. He wouldn't be able to fall back asleep. Soon enough, the voice came again. It was louder this time, like rolling thunder. "Samuel! Samuel!" And the temple floor beneath him vibrated with the sound. Samuel cracked one eye open to see the speaker. He saw a beaming pillar of light. It was the Lord. It was still a few hours until daybreak, but suddenly the shadows were gone. There was nowhere to hide. Samuel swallowed. "Speak, Lord. I'm here." The Lord roared into the temple.
"I am about to do a shocking thing in Israel."
Samuel gasped. The Lord continued,
"I will punish Eli's house forever for the sin that he knew because his sons were blaspheming God and he did not stop them. Therefore I swear to the house of Eli that the sin of Eli's house shall not be atoned for by sacrifice or offering forever."
In an instant, the light turned back to darkness, and Samuel was alone again in the temple. His eyes adjusted to the black night, and he saw that the curtain separating the most holy place waved as if there were a breeze, the only sign that the Lord of hosts had been there. Samuel lay until morning, still quaking at the Lord's appearance. Eli was right. God will punish Eli's sons. He recalled the priest's words. But how can it be? At morning, Samuel opened the doors of the house of the Lord and busied himself in the courtyard to avoid the priest. It was nearly noon when Eli appeared at the temple door. Eli approached and stood above him.
"Samuel, my son, what did he tell you?"
Samuel's eyes welled with tears, and he looked down to hide his face. He focused on the treasures he'd lined up on the ground, bits of broken pottery left behind by the worshippers' offerings. Eli squatted to the boy's level and rested a hand on his shoulder.
"You can tell me."
Samuel sighed and dropped a shard of ceramic back into the dirt. Eli said,
"Come, my son."
And they returned to the temple to sit outside the door. Samuel told Eli everything the Lord had said and hid nothing from him. Samuel sniffed through tears that dribbled over his mouth, gurgling his words. "The Lord said he would punish your house forever." Eli offered a cloth and dabbed at Samuel's tears.
"It is the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him."
Samuel shook his head. "What do you mean, Father? How can you say that?"
Eli explained, "My son, the Lord will raise up for himself a faithful priest, not like those evil priests who disobey his commands. The chosen one can only do what is according to God's heart and mind."
"Father, when will that faithful priest come?" Samuel asked.
"Only the Lord knows the time," Eli assured him. "But know this, Samuel, there is a better priest, and a king who is to come."
Hannah and Elkanah traveled for the yearly sacrifice. They set up their camp as usual, same tent covering, same clay vessels for the peace offering. But this year was different. The Philistines had stolen the ark of the Lord, and it had been gone for 7 months. When the ark returned, Samuel called all Israel to Mizpah. The ark of the Lord, the presence of the Lord, dwelt with his people once again. It was cause for celebration. Hannah cradled a sack of grain in the crook of her arm and slipped into the temple. She knew she'd find him there. The young man, Samuel, stood at the head of the temple, corralling people onto long wooden benches for the ceremony to begin. The mother approached her son at work and rested a hand on his elbow. "Mom!" Samuel welcomed his mother and wrapped her into a hug. He was her height now, and had long outgrown the robes Hannah made for him. He now wore priestly robes of woven purple linen. She smiled and retreated to join the assembly. Hannah watched as Samuel prepared a lamb as an offering to the Lord. His hands were sure, none of the nervousness of the young boy who had served at Eli's side so many years before. The people implored Samuel, "We have sinned against the Lord. Never stop praying to the Lord on our behalf, for he hears you. Pray that he will save us from the Philistines." She saw her son, the boy, now respond as a loving father. Samuel encouraged the people, "I will pray to the Lord for you, today and always. The ark has returned to Israel. God is with us. Today our fasting turns to feasting." So the assembly huddled together in the temple, his mother Hannah among them, and said, "God, we thank you for your mercy on us and for returning to your people." Samuel invited Hannah to join him in the courtyard for dinner after the ceremony. The younger priests served them meat from the sacrifice on earthenware plates. Hannah knelt on a cushion and speared a piece of lamb. She watched her son move through the crowd, embracing people as he went. She remembered the years of heartbreak, first when she left him at the temple as a toddler, and every year after when they had to part ways. For those many years, she prayed that God would use Samuel to heal Israel, though she didn't know when or how it would happen. Hannah dipped the morsel on her fork into a bowl of sauce and smiled to herself. The Lord was faithful to grow her son. He used him to lead the people in worship. Just then, Samuel returned to Hannah's side and held her hand. She observed their fingers intertwined and said a silent prayer. "Thank you, Lord. You have turned my heartbreak into blessing for me and for all Israel." Her beloved son led Israel in sacrifices to the Lord. She knew her sacrifice had been worth it. Thank you for watching and listening to this week's episode of the Think Forever podcast. If you're enjoying the show, we'd love it if you would leave us a comment or a review. Let us know what you think. You can also find us on our socials at Go Think Forever. And be sure to join us next week as I interview author Kelsey Post about her story, The Prophet.